Chapter 5. What Burns? The quest was called a package for Old Fen. It rewarded 40 copper and trivial experience, and every guide on every wiki said the same thing about it. Skip unless completionist. Ethan took it because it went east, and east was where his copper was. Old Fen turned out to be the keeper of a way station in the hills, a bent, white-whiskered NPC who received his package, lamp oil, wrapped in oilcloth, with the delight of a man receiving news from a front. And then he started talking. This was the trap, per the wiki. Old Fen was flagged as a rambler, one of Second Dawn's new. Deep dialogue. NPCs, seeded with what data miners estimated was 40 minutes of branching monologue, none of it skippable by design, all of it gated behind continuing to stand there. The forums had declared him a war crime. He just keeps going, said the top-voted comment. I lost 11 minutes of my life before I realized you can just walk away. Ethan, of course, stayed. He stayed because staying had become the whole shape of his strategy, and it had already paid twice over. Conductive path had come from a blacksmith's complaint about lightning striking his forged chimney. A mana-saving trick had come from a laundrywoman's gossip about the proper way to stir a cauldron. Threshold and its hills were salted with knowledge, hidden in the one place no player would ever look, inside the dialogue. Old Fen talked about the road. He talked about his knee. He talked about his brother in Fallowmere, who had married ambitiously and now owned 2 hats. 11 minutes in right where the forum poster had cracked, the old man refilled his lamp with the delivered oil and lit it and paused with the match still burning between his fingers. You know what my father did, boy? He said. Fire watcher, up the old observatory before it fell to ruin. 60 years on that mountain, watching for smoke in the valleys. He shook the match out. He used to say the strangest thing about fire. Said everyone fears it as a beast, and it's no beast at all, said. And here the old man's voice shifted, the cadence changing, the way a quoted sentence keeps the shape of its original speaker. Fire is not a thing, boy. Fire is a thing happening. Every hair on Ethan's arms stood up. That was not Old Fen's sentence. That sentence had a different author. He had been listening to that author's cadences 4 nights a week for a month. Your father, Ethan said carefully. Who taught him that? The Rambler flag must have covered questions too, because Old Fen's eyes crinkled with the pleasure of a man asked to keep talking. Some scholars used to climb to the observatory in Father's day, robes and a brass thing at his belt. Father said he'd stand at the scope all night, not looking at the stars at all, looking down at the valley towns. A wheezing chuckle. Left his notebooks up there when the roof went. Reckon the Weathers had them by now. The quest tracker chimed, soft and amber. Hidden objective discovered. The Fire Watcher's notebooks. Zam. Robes and a brass thing at his belt. In his father's day. Ethan looked up the hill road, toward the broken tooth of the observatory on the ridgeline, and felt the small note-taking voice in the back of his skull open its file again. Item 5. He doesn't just have last times, he has decades. He started climbing. The observatory had been beautiful once. You could read it in the ruin, the dome's ribs still swept up in a curve that someone had cared about, and the doorway was cut so the winter sunrise would land on the workbench. The roof was long gone. The Weather should have had the notebooks, exactly as Old Fen said. The notebooks were in a copper chest, and the copper chest was green with 60 years of patina everywhere except the lid's edge, where hands had opened it. Recently, more than once. Ethan noted that, filed it, and opened the chest. The Firewatcher's notebooks, Val. Aye, what burns? The handwriting was not an old man's. It was precise, patient, and completely regular, so regular that on the second page, Ethan stopped reading for a moment and just looked at it, because every E was every other E, and no human hand did that. Then he kept reading, because what the hand had written was better than what the hand implied. People believe fire is an element, the first page began. This is astrology for the warm. Watch closer. Take wood. Wood is a crowd, tightly holding hands, long chains of them, built by years of patient sunlight. The chains are content. Contentment in the small world means bound. It costs energy to break a bond, and the crowd does not spend without reason. Now bring heat, which is to say, jostling. Jostle the chains hard enough, and one link breaks free, flies out, and strikes the air. The air is a crowd too, and part of that crowd, one breath in five, is a bully called Oxygen, who wants nothing in this world so much as to grab what flies loose. When Oxygen grabs, it grabs greedily. The new bond is tighter than the old, and the difference between loose and tight is paid out at once, as more jostling. Read that again, because it is the entire secret. The joining pays, and the payment jostles the next chain loose, whose freed links the bully also grabs, whose joining also pays. And there, that cascade, that stampede of break grab pay running through the crowd faster than the crowd can calm itself, that is fire, not a thing happening, a rumor of heat that the world tells itself, each teller paying the next. The flame you see is only the crowd glowing where it jostles hardest. The heat you feel is the payment. The ash you sweep is the crowd after the bully has taken everyone worth taking. Ethan lowered the notebook and looked at the cold brazier in the corner and could not see it the same way. His whole life he'd have said fire is hot. Now the words rearranged themselves, quietly and permanently. Heat wasn't something fire had. Heat was the sound of a crowd tearing itself apart for profit. He picked the page back up like a man who'd been told the floor was falling and wanted the rate. Therefore, to light a fire, the magus needs no fire at all. He needs only three things, and if he is honest, he will notice none of them is magic. Something whose chains can break profitably. The miser calls this fuel. The bully present in good supply, air, air, and the first jostling, hard enough to snap the first link. The world calls this kindling temperature. I call it the toll at the bridge. Ethan sat back on his heels. The toll at the bridge, of all the phrases. He looked at that line a long moment, then took out his own notebook and copied the whole page by hand, because friction, and underneath it, he wrote the translation into his own language. Combustion equals self-sustaining exothermic oxidation. Fuel plus O2 plus activation energy. The reaction is downhill, releases energy, but starts uphill, needs the first push over the barrier. Fire isn't created. Fire is unlocked. All I have to supply is the activation energy, one hot point, one moment. The chain reaction is the world's business. One hot point. He almost laughed. A month ago, on his first night, he had tried to make heat by shouting at a cubic foot of air, trying to jostle a whole mob at once, the brute force approach, the assisted cast approach, and it had ignored him completely. He hadn't been wrong that heat was hard. He'd been wrong about how much of it he needed, and where. He didn't need a hot cloud. He needed a hot point, one pinch of the crowd, jostled past the toll, touching something whose chains would pay for everything after. And he already knew how to concentrate the grain's attention on a point. He'd been doing it for a month. Every thread of static was exactly that, a difference built small and sharp and somewhere. His hands were shaking slightly as he gathered tinder from the ruin's corner, dry grass, birch curls, the fire watcher's own 60-year-old kindling basket, which felt like either sacrilege or ceremony. He couldn't decide. He built the little cone the way his father had taught him on the one camping trip of his childhood. Then he knelt and touched the grain, and instead of a slope he built a pinpoint. All of his attention, every scrap of the focus he'd spent a month strengthening, brought down onto a single birch curl's edge, onto a patch of the crowd smaller than a raindrop, and he asked it to jostle. Not the mob, just you, just here, just past the toll. The birch curl smoked. A dot of orange crawled along its edge, hesitated, found the chain's first link, and paid. Fire climbed through the little cone with a sound like a page turning. Ordinary fire, kindling-sized, the kind produced 10,000 times a night in void by any level 1 mage with a seal and a boar to cook. It gilded the ruined dome ribs. It warmed his hands, which had gone cold without his noticing. It was, by every metric on every screen, nothing. Technique comprehended. Ignition, tier I. Mana efficiency, 327%. Hidden objective complete. The Firewatcher's notebooks. Ethan knelt in front of nothing, grinning like an idiot, eyes stinging from the smoke. He would have said if anyone had been there to ask. The seal-bearer owns a fireball, the old man had said on the first night. The one who understands owns fire. He understood it now, that sentence, not as poetry but as engineering. In Burflick, the seal produced one effect at one cost forever, a scribe you paid per letter. But ignition wasn't an effect. It was the toll booth itself. Anything whose chains could pay, he could now unlock. Candle, forge, grease on a blade, the oil a certain kind of duelist war to make black lacquer shine. The seal was a product. The principle was a capability, and capabilities compounded. His eyes went back to the chest. What burns? Volume 1. He lifted it out and looked beneath, and found the imprint in 60 years of dust where Volume II had lain, a clean rectangle, recently emptied, and caught on the chest's copper lip, the torn corner of a single page. Someone had taken the second notebook, and not gently. They'd ripped a trailing page free of the binding on the way out. The torn corner had 4 words on it, in that too regular hand. Wet the cold costs. Ethan stood in the ruined observatory, his first understood fire crackling behind him, and read 4 words about ice, torn off by hands that had been here before him and left in a hurry. 7 of us, he thought, ever, and one of them is ahead of me on the trail. Far down the valley, the way station's lamp glowed, old oil, new flame, and past it, on the ridge road, a rider he couldn't make out was heading east fast, toward the copper hills, toward the places past them that Ethan hadn't earned yet. He watched until the dark took the road entirely. Then he sat down by his fire with both notebooks, the Firewatcher's and his own, and read Volume I again from the first page. Slowly this time, taking the tolls one by one.